Hello everybody, good afternoon and welcome to the United Stands. I'm Mark Goldbridge and this is your Erik ten Hag press conference reaction as he reacts to criticism from Jamie Carragher. Very interesting comments there. He also speaks about his future and the conversations he's had with Ineos. And look, to be honest with you, he also spoke about Antony and the issues with Antony, why he's picking Forsen. So lots to get involved with as well. A relatively brief press conference from Erik ten Hag, I think it's fair to say, but some key points in there. And what better place to start than a good question in a press conference whereby Erik ten Hag was asked if he'd seen Monday Night Football last night, where Jamie Carragher, for some reason, thought he had solved Manchester United's problems by spotting something many of you have been talking about all season. How we're playing a high press and a low block. And obviously, we know from the conversations we have all the time that the reason we're doing this is because we've got slow defenders, but we want to go and get the ball. And you end up with this big gap. And then the alternative to that is to park the bus at home to Fulham and then watch the meltdown then. And I thought Ten Hag's reaction was very, very good to this. He was asked about what his thoughts were on somebody, identifying and, slamming his tactics. And basically said, look, some analysts are objective. And I think we, in the main, are objective. When I look at United and we're talking on a watch-along and we're acknowledging you can park a plane in the midfield because the defence is low and the attack is high, we can just say that's rubbish, what a terrible coach, rah, rah, rah. That's being subjective. We're objective and we'll say, well, the alternative is we have to play the low block because of Lindelof and Maguire, because of a lack of pace. Do we therefore play compact like... Carragher was getting a stiffy last night about compact football, but what he's basically saying is, if you want to play compact, you've got to park the bus at home to Fulham, and you're going to get criticised for that. So, Ten Hag says, some analysts are objective, and objectivity is to say, yeah, he is doing that, but you can see why he's doing it, because he can't park the bus at home to Fulham. Subjective people are like Carragher who rip apart into it. And he said this, some analysts are objective, but from the first moment, it's very clear that Carragher has a problem with us. And now he's had his moment to go at us with his subjectivity. He said, I wasn't happy with the way we played, but most of that was down to the willingness to do what needed to be done in those circumstances. And in a game like that, you do need to be relying on intensity and passion and unity. And I think he's absolutely right, because we had that in the last few games. I don't think we played particularly brilliantly in any of the games apart from Wolves for the first 60 minutes when we had our best team out. We didn't have Martinez and Shaw against Luton. I think we lost them both at against West Ham. So we are very reliant at the moment on unity, willingness and passion. And none of us like those words. We don't like those words. But it's an objective. It's an objectivity that I think Ten Hag is completely correct about. We are very reliant at the moment on willingness, passion and unity because we don't have the players to play the way that we want to play. That's called objective criticism, which I think Ten Hag is saying I'm willing to take on board. We didn't play well. We're not happy. But subjective criticism, where people are just subjecting us to their opinions without being objective, it's a bit like what I say. Opinion without accountability doesn't mean much, because you can all shout, look at the tactics, they're terrible. But why are the tactics like that when you look at the players that we've got? And I think Ten Hag's right. And I think he's right to respond to Jamie Carragher when he's asked a direct question, because Jamie Carragher sits in his... Well, he doesn't. He stands in front of a nice big screen with his nice trainers on, getting really excited because he thinks he's found something that nobody else has been talking about for 4 months. We've literally been talking about midfield overloads all season. And the reason for that is because we just haven't had the defenders to push high up and compact the team. So you either push back or push forward. And this is why we work really well away from home, because when we're away from home, we can play a little bit more deeper because it's more acceptable to counter-attack from deep away from home. But when you're at Old Trafford, you have got to try and go for it in front of 75,000 fans, but you can't play a high line, so you leave a big gap in midfield. And that is objective criticism. He was also asked about the future with Ineos and, does he talk about the future with people like Sir David Brailsford? And he says, look, I know the future, but we've got to look at the now. We know what the future is. We're already looking long term, but we've got to look at the now, and I've got to look at the game tomorrow. But we have had conversations about the longer term, and I know what the future is. Some people will say, well, I don't know what the future is, Mark, but I think that I don't know what the future is either, but I don't know whether Ten Hag will get that future based on what's going on around him. I would acknowledge there is a hell of a lot of noise around him at the moment, rightly or wrongly. But these conversations apparently are going on within Ineos. And I'll go back to what Gary Neville said last night, and he is correct. Why would you sit around having long-term conversations about the future with Ten Hag if you're planning to change it? I think that's a very big if at this moment in time. I still think that there is a chance that we continue down this path and build something. Somebody made a great point in the chat last night about the under-18s and how they're doing and the structures that have been put in place by Ten Hag in relation to the youth team all the way through to the first team. So there's a lot to be considered, of course. Talking about the game with Nottingham Forest, he said, look, we've got to win every single game. That's what we've got to do. But it's a poor performance. It's a poor game. And, we have to acknowledge that. But the aim is still to win every single game. As I said, he spoke about why it went wrong against Nottingham Forest and basically said that, the willingness has to be there from the players. It's got to be there from the players in every single game. And it wasn't. But he said, in fairness, he did say players aren't robots, and therefore, sometimes players have bad games. So it's not like he's throwing his players under the bus, but I think we all know that the performance on Saturday wasn't good enough. He was asked about Antony directly, what the issue is with Antony, why he's not getting into the team, and he basically said, look, Antony's had a load of games, and he's not in the team at the moment, which is, I'm sure, something that all of you would agree with. He said he's got great abilities. I've seen him. I know what he's all about. I've had him at another club. When he's on it, he's unstoppable over 10 yards, but he's not showing it at the moment. I'm sure he will come good. He's a resilient player and he's a fighter. So look, interesting words on Antony, and I think it just summarises I don't think anyone would disagree with this. He's taken him out of the team because he's not playing well. He's acknowledged that. He's took him out of the team. He's been asked a question about Antony and he's given an answer that, look, I believe he can be a good player for Manchester United. I believe he's got the resilience and the ability to fight back. I believe in the talent that he is. And that's what he's got to do. He's got to take on those words and he's got to, deliver in a more consistent and certainly at a higher level. He was asked about younger players and the selection of Forson at the weekend. Obviously, quite a lot of people were giving him criticism around that, which I felt was a little bit unfair. He said that, look, people question me about picking Forson and saying I shouldn't have doing it. But regards what is actually going on at the club at the moment, people question me around Mainu. And now people are saying he should be going to the Euros with England. People question me about Garnacho, and now he's probably the first winger on the team sheet at the moment and probably the only player to come out of the Fulham game with any semblance of credit. He said, look, Forson needs time. He's a young player. There's no doubt about that he's going to need time. But on the other hand, you don't get time at this level and you've got to take your chances. But when he played on Saturday, it wasn't his best. He also played in a game where nobody played well. And as a young player, we talk about this all the time, the nurturing of young players. When we dropped the class of 92 in, they're playing with the likes of Roy Keane, Peter Schmeichel, Steve Bruce, Eric Cantona. Forson makes his full home debut for Fulham, and he's playing in a team that's full of absolutely substandard performances from the majority of the team. So you're asking him not only to make his debut, but also to be some sort of Messi that grabs hold of the ball, skips past players and makes things happen on his own. I'm sure Forson, and I think what Ten Hag is saying is that Forson's performance in a United team that was playing well would have been better. But obviously he's playing in a team that's not playing well, and that impacts him. Of course, he's got to take his opportunities, but Ten Hag said, look, I see him as a player for the future. I get that you need to play for the now, and that's my job to balance. I want to give him time. That's what I want to do, and I will give him time because I believe in him. And as he said, I've been criticised before for putting younger players in, but that's what we will do when we believe in players. And, I don't think you can moan massively about that. As I said, it wasn't the longest of press conferences, and I don't think anybody really delved into the questions that maybe we thought they would. Maybe there'll be bits in the embargoed section later on tonight, but there's certainly been a lot of journalists mouthing off about new managers and stuff. Well, they were sat in the press conference. I don't know where those questions were coming from, but obviously they'd be pointless questions anyway. You're not going to sit there and say to a manager of Manchester United, I've heard you're going to get the sack. I mean, what's Ten Hag going to say to that? But it's a big week. It's a really big week. We did the preview last night, and I suppose I would throw the question to you for this one. What are your thoughts about the game tomorrow? I mean, I think we'll win, but again, I think it will be really difficult. I think it will be really stressful football again, which it has been for a few weeks now, because I just think that we don't have the quality to go and beat a team 3 or 4-0. But I also acknowledge if it's one of those nights where we don't win, then we're going to be in the same situation we were against Fulham, where there is this, split of opinion about what's responsible. I think if we lose tomorrow, I will put it on the players again. I will. I think that there's not really a team I can pick that is obviously going to go to Forest and win. So when Ten Hag's talking about the performance on Saturday against Fulham and talking about willingness, unity, concentration and passion, they're not really words I want to use for a Man United team, but I look at what we have available and I acknowledge that, you do get to this point. And it's interesting, there was a stat that went out this morning. This time last year, Jurgen Klopp had the same amount of points as Manchester United. And that just goes to show you what injuries can do. Key injuries, not injuries, key injuries can do to a team. And that's really interesting, isn't it? This time last year, Liverpool pretty much had the same points as Manchester United. And look at where they are now, with a good summer and players back. So I think that what I'm trying to say is here, it's not about keeping the manager, it's about the match tomorrow. I do not think that anybody talking about patterns of play or, compactness and all this, it's nonsense. Tomorrow will come down to whether the players fancy it or not. Last time at the City Ground, we'd just beaten Aston Villa on Boxing Day in a really good second half performance. We went to the City Ground and we didn't turn up. At the weekend, after 4 good results, we didn't turn up against Fulham. And I think tomorrow really will come down to whether they turn up or not. If the players turn up, I think we've got a chance. If the players don't turn up, then, it could be another bad result. But I'm telling you now, I'm really at that stage now where we were with Mourinho and Ollie, and Ranić's a bad one to do. But, we're not at the end of days of Ollie and Jose, but we're certainly at that point where you're starting to look at players, and I think they're looking at other things. I think they're starting to look, can I get this manager sacked and survive another years and get another new contract? Or, what am I doing in the summer? And what those players need to do is what we said in the preview last night. They need to step up and stand forward and, whatever their personal feelings are about the manager, what's your personal feelings about the football club, the badge, the fans? Because this is basically our last chance of getting anywhere near a trophy. We did get to the FA Cup final last year. It was a bloody embarrassment, but we got to the final. There's an opportunity, and look, that's another example, isn't it? We forget about that. I mean, last season was really good. We came third. We won the Carabao Cup. That FA Cup final, people forget about it because it was the last game of the season. It was a bloody embarrassment. It was an absolute embarrassment, that cup final. Was that the game where he subbed off, was it Sancho, and brought on Garnacho for 20 minutes, and Garnacho was the man of the match in 20 minutes? He was the only guy doing anything. That performance in that final was absolute shite, and we forget about it because it was last season. But again, why were we shit in the final? Because players didn't bother to turn up again, and it's an FA Cup final between Manchester United and Man City, and the players just didn't turn up. They didn't turn up again, and this is too regular a problem to ignore. It's been going on for years, and I would say, look, tomorrow Ten Hag is right. It's about willingness, passion, desire, and unity, because we're up against it. Everybody's against us. The media's against us. The injuries are against us. The league is against us. You know, people want Manchester United to lose, and I certainly don't. And I think what we need to see tomorrow is a team that actually plays for each other instead of playing for individuals. And only they can do that. We've been so unlucky this season. We're playing with kids and the same players we've been criticising for years, but somehow fans want Eric Ten Hag out, says Mario Franco, and they'd rather have Potter. I mean, God, Graham Potter terrifies me. I mean, I didn't intend to go down that route on a press conference reaction, but Graham Potter completely terrifies me. I mean, on what planet does Graham Potter get a Man United job? It doesn't make any sense. Terp says, I'm tired of this fan base wanting a new shiny toy. Maybe Ten Hag is not the right guy in the future, but we need to get rid of the players first. And Northeast Midwest says, there is a media witch hunt against Ten Hag. They already admitted it. Remember, the interviewer let it slip. They like when United lose for the chaos, says Northeast Midwest. Mark, at the start of the season, I told you Bruno is a big problem in midfield. You don't like my comment. Now you see with your own eyes, says Madison. Look, I put a clip on Twitter today, and it's on the podcast, which you can check out by scanning the QR code. But I put a clip out from the podcast. It's more in depth, but there's a clip from the podcast on my Twitter where I basically said that Bruno Fernandes doesn't start for Tottenham. Now, even Beth atted me on Twitter saying he does. And I said, no, you're not listening, Beth. You haven't listened to the clip. What people don't understand is, again, and we're talking about objectivity here, people think because Erling Haaland's the best striker in the world, he starts for every team. He doesn't. People think because Bruno Fernandes is the most creative number 10 statistically since 2020 in the Premier League, he starts for every team. He doesn't. Teams have structures. Teams have styles of play. Bruno Fernandes, and I've said this for years, Bruno Fernandes, I really like him. He's one of my favourite players. But he's never, ever, ever adapted to being a possession-based number 10. By his own admission, he has said in interviews, I'm never going to stop taking risky passes on. It's what I'm all about. Well, that's the number 10 Ten Hag's got at the moment because Mason Mount's not fit and Eriksen's just not up to it. So Bruno Fernandes is the only number 10 Eric Ten Hag can pick. And it's his captain as well because we don't really have any captains either. Bruno Fernandes would not start for Spurs, in my opinion, because James Maddison is better than him in relation to the system that Ange wants to play and the ball rotation required in a system like that. If you put Bruno Fernandes in a Spurs team, he's just going to get the ball, look for Son and try and hit him from 30 yards 20 times a game. If you put James Maddison in there, he's going to pick up the ball, he's going to scan, he might knock it into Basuma and move into space to get it back himself, he might knock it in behind for Son, he might go right to Kulusevski and play a couple of 1-2s, he might work the angle to whip a cross in towards Richarlison. He's a multifaceted number 10 who understands his job is ball retention in and around the penalty box. Bruno Fernandes isn't that sort of number 10. And anybody who thinks he is doesn't watch Manchester United. Bruno Fernandes is not interested in receiving the ball from Casemiro, having a little look, playing a 5-yard pass into Dalot, moving into a space, receiving it back, wall pass into Garnacho. He's not interested in all that. Bruno Fernandes gets the ball, has a look and goes, boom, and that's what he does. And when it works, it's great. But you're not going to be a high possession team with Bruno Fernandes playing like that. And that's what I'm talking about. People don't look at styles of play. People just go either or. Bruno's better than Maddison. I think Bruno Fernandes is better than Maddison. I actually do. As a footballer. But in the modern game, in certain systems, he doesn't work. And when you watch Fulham, which is our most recent game, what's he doing in that game? Losing the ball. Losing the ball to a team that knows if they play through our press are at our back four. You swap Bruno Fernandes out of the Fulham game for James Maddison, different game, because you knock the ball into Maddison and he knows he's got to look after it because if he loses it, they're going to play through the press and they're going to get at us. I'll guarantee you now, if you put James Maddison in Bruno's position on Saturday, Fulham don't have anywhere near the chances they do because they're not going to break on us because instead of that game being played out, you've suddenly got a number 10 who slows the game down a little bit, who looks at the ball and goes, look, there was one where Bruno gets it, Garnacho's on the left. There's space for him to run into, Bruno. And then there's Rashford, who's never going to get this pass unless it's a 1 in 100. What does Bruno do? 1 in 100 pass to Rashford. Possession back with Fulham. They come again. Whereas Maddison would probably dribble into the space a little bit and make yardage into a better place. Or he'd knock it to the simple pass to Garnacho, who can run into space. But Bruno, boom. Oh, it didn't work. Fulham are attacking again. Oh, give it me back again. Boom. Oh, Fulham are attacking a bit again. And that's what people don't see. Bruno's a very, very good player, playing very, very badly at the moment, and we're not keeping hold of the ball. Now, quite rightly, people would say, well, Ten Hag should drop him. The problem is, who are you going to drop him for? Eriksen cannot move. He's so slow. You can't play Eriksen as the number 10 at the moment. He's too slow. You can't play Mason Mount because he's injured. Could you try someone like Ahmad in that position? Is he really a number 10? It's difficult. We haven't really got anybody there. Ricky been saying it for years, says Zabi. Look, Ricky's not right about Bruno Fernandes because Bruno Fernandes has been crap for the last few weeks. Bruno Fernandes was brilliant for us for the first year or two. And Ricky was saying he wasn't very good then. So, everybody has a sunny day. A broken clock's right twice a day. We can't just say Bruno's been a shit signing, and I still really like Bruno, but it's become a real problem in this team. If you're playing in a team that's got Martinez in it and Luke Shaw in it and Højlund in it, then Bruno's not much of a problem. It's still frustrating, but he's not as big a problem. But in a team that like Saturday, you can't afford that. You can't afford to be gifting the ball away with Hollywood passes. You can't. You really can't. Anyway, look, thank you very much for tuning in. We've got Fabrizio on the show at 4 o'clock, so make sure you tune in for that one. Looking forward to that. And we've also got... what else have we got? I'm back on the show tonight as well. But check out the podcast. It's a really good listen on that Bruno bit, and also talking about the season being over and, the comparisons with Ten Hag and Klopp last year and Eddie Howe and Poch this year. I don't even care about fans and what they think about Ten Hag. You've got the right to choose what you want to do, and I can disagree with it or I can agree with it. That's fine. But where I do draw the line, and I said it this morning on Twitter, the Ten Hag out movement's had a bad day. When Samuel Lucker's signing up for Ten Hag out, it's not the sort of signing you want, is it? It's not really. But I think that I don't care. I think at the end of the day, I had somebody say to me the other day, oh, Goldbridge is on the payroll, Ten Hag stand. And I laughed and I went, you now get bantered and criticised for backing your manager. Football's changing. It's changing in front of our eyes. But... on a serious note, I don't care whether you're Ten Hag or Ten Hag out or Ten Hag in. When you're getting into bed with the media and agreeing with them because it fits your rhetoric, I'd keep if I was a Ten Hag outer, I'd keep an independent stance. I don't need the media on my side. I'd be like, I'm Ten Hag out for this. I don't need this shit. The media are when you're friends with the media on stuff like this, it's never a good thing. I'd just ignore it. Anyway, look, just Kevin says you criticise people for being Erik Ten Hag out. Yes, I do. Because I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. And you don't agree with me. I don't care about that. That's fine. That's what we've been doing for 10 years. I was Van Gaal out very early. Loads of people didn't agree with me. I stuck by Jose and Ollie for a long time. Loads of people didn't agree with me. I can deal with that. It's absolutely fine. But I don't agree with the media because they've got a completely different agenda. I don't think they care about Manchester United at all. I think they care about, different things. But what my point was, just Kevin, is how can you criticise a Manchester United fan for backing the manager? That's like, how can that be a negative? How can that be, ridiculous or stupid? You might be wrong, but backing the manager of your football club surely has to be the more obvious choice as a fan than, saying you want a manager to be sacked. It's almost like, what my point is, just Kevin, I don't mind if you're Ten Hag out. That's fine. And as I said this morning, I'd like there to be a decision made so we can all get on with it. But my point is, if you're Ten Hag out, that's your choice. But it's not the obvious yay choice, is it? It's a negative choice. Doesn't mean you're wrong. Doesn't mean you can't say it. But what I'm saying is, being Ten Hag out is the negative choice. Being Ten Hag, supporting your manager, is supporting your club, I think, more than being disruptive and trying to get him out. And I'm not going down the road of Saturday where I'm saying you scum or anything like that. That was an overreaction. We just conceded a goal against Fulham. You've got every right to be Ten Hag out. But I find it funny that if you're Ten Hag in, you're criticised. But he's the manager of the football club I support, and I'm supporting him. That should always be the default, in my opinion, until you get to a point like just Keevan that you're not. But I don't think just Keevan and people should be criticising us for backing the manager of our football club. That's the default. If you decide not to do that, that's up to you. I could criticise you, like I did on Saturday. But I could say, you know, you're no good for this football club. You flip flops. You change your mind every bloody minute. You're a load of shit and all this, which I did on Saturday. I put my hands up, but that's not really where I'm at when I'm a lot calmer. We all get lost in the moment, don't we? And as you know, everyone's entitled to an opinion on here, and you know, good for you for expressing it. Good for you for expressing it. Thanks, everyone. No injury updates were even mentioned, Mohammed. None at all. I will speak to you all a little bit later. Don't forget to check out Fabrizio Romano at 4 o'clock on the channel. We've got the latest on Ten Hag's potential replacements, Dan Ashworth latest, signings, exits, the lot. We'll speak to you then.